Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, November 20th, 2022. Wow, 22s, a lot of 22s going on, some 11s, which is half of 22. Some crazy numerology happening today. 11, 22, 22. Just think where we'll be in 22 years from now when it's 11, 22, 44, and we're all dead or something. I don't know. but it's something great will be happening, no doubt, unless, of course, we destroy ourselves, fry the planet, or Elon Musk is allowed to continue on, in which case, who knows what could be happening. We'll all have electric cars, but we all will have to be in the Elon Musk fan club or be shot or something like that. I imagine that's where we're headed somehow in the course of evolution. All right, it being Tuesday, we would ordinarily have Joan McCarter here for her usual late show visit, last segment. But today, being Tuesday, you know how it is in Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving is on Thursday. That means Wednesday is now officially part of the holiday as people drive to where they're going for Thursday. And now, of course, America's great tradition, beating the traffic, means that Tuesday is also part of the Thanksgiving holiday. And although Joan has no travel going on at the moment, she's covering for all the Daily Kos folks who do, or who have sick kids and are home and doing that, or are otherwise in other various ways celebrating the holiday. And I think tending to kids with colds counts as celebrating the holiday. It's not fun, but that's the holiday. That's the nature of it. So, all right, plenty going on over there then that will distract her enough that it is unlikely that she will be able to join us today. As in, no, she won't be. I mean, that's how unlikely it is. That's a lot of unlikely piled up into one place. Anyway, on the other hand, yesterday it was a power outage that took Greg Dworkin out of action, but ordinarily he would be off today and we'd have Joan in. But guess what? He missed yesterday, and as it turns out, there was a whole bunch of news. I tried talking about news. I guess I didn't get the right news, or we didn't get the right take on it, or we did, and he's coming to tell us that. He might like to chime in at some point and join us today, and we got kind of a yeah, I might be able to do that response, and then a raft of stories that started floating in. So I'm thinking it's an enthusiastic response, and we haven't even made our plans for Wednesday. If we are to do a live show, first of all, it would be a tremendous sacrifice, and you should all start sending us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this time you can send it directly to Greg, because, you know, no one ever sends him any money, and that would be nice for a change, I guess. And then he could pile it up, and Abby could bark at it, and life would be great. And at any time, or at any rate, tomorrow, if we are to do a show, tomorrow we'll be doing a show interviewing people at diners, or that's what it will sound like in the background. We'll be in a working kitchen. We'll relocate the world headquarters to the same place it always is. It's that we'll be relocating other people from places where they usually are to the working Thanksgiving kitchen on Wednesday. I imagine it'll be even louder on Thursday, and I don't know if we have real plans to do a Thursday show. Friday, we're off the air. It's just an impossibility. Whether we can get something recorded for you or not remains to be seen. It'll be very noisy here the balance of the week. All right, so let's see. What else is new? First of all, I'll check my New York Times coronavirus tracker, as I regularly do before the show, but rarely speak about anymore. But things seem to be holding more or less steady here in Loudoun County. Our samples, we did fall below 40 cases daily briefly at some point about 2 weeks ago, but it has bounced back up, occasionally shoots above 50, but still kind of holding steady, and I think most people are just testing at home, not reporting much in the way of the usual numbers to county authorities, etc. And the coronavirus watch on worldometers is becoming increasingly useless for United States data. I keep doing it out of force of habit, but I'm starting to reevaluate it both because the data is becoming so thin has routinely far fewer than half of states actually even bother to report results most days. During the week, it fluctuates between about 15 states on Mondays up to, you get at best about occasionally top 30 states reporting. But really, it tops out at about half of states reporting on Wednesday and dips back down by Friday. And over the weekend now, we're down to literally like only 2 states on Saturdays and Sundays. 2 on Sundays. On Saturdays, we tend to hear from New York, New Jersey, and Arkansas. So explain that one to me. And then New York and just Arkansas. Jersey drops out on Sundays now. And Rhode Island, which had, when it was reporting at all, was at the top of the charts in terms of the number of Rhode Island residents per 100,000 who had contracted coronavirus. They stopped reporting entirely, and I haven't heard from them in weeks. And yet they're still at the top of the list because, well, a couple of things. One, they were really way out there for some reason and way ahead of everybody else. And then the states sitting in second, third, fourth, fifth place also stopped reporting, although they show up once a week usually, but they haven't yet been able to catch Rhode Island, which actually has frozen its numbers, it appears, for the past couple of weeks, and they're still uncatchable. So I don't know exactly what's going on. Lots of requests to start culling data from other sources, but I'm tired, and we're all tired of the pandemic, and I don't know how much longer it should go on. Plus, on top of all of that, I don't know how much longer I want to feed that information onto Twitter and provide content for what's happening there. I got to find a way to migrate everything over. And, well, here's Greg Dworkin. He can tell us about his travails in that and the successes we've found on Mastodon, the failures, the changes ahead, whatever's on your mind. Good morning, Greg. Good to have you here today.
Oh, good morning. And so it's good that the power's working.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the power outage was the day before Sunday, and we had a lot of tree limbs come down. Then there was damage, and so the electrician had to come between 9 and 11 yesterday.
That's
and
the time.
They had to turn the power off to fix stuff, so it wasn't a good time to do a show.
I guess not. Okay, yeah, and the formatting of TweetDeck is what got in the way there. You sent me this notice that we had the power outage, and then there was 1 or 2 other stories. You said, well, you might as well read these stories while I'm not there. And the way it is on TweetDeck, yeah.
I gave you something to talk about.
Right, and you did. Well, a lot of things to talk about, including what happened to Greg. Where is he? But yeah, in TweetDeck over in the direct message column, it pushes up. It just shows you the last one whoever you're talking to sent, and it was this nice one about, all right, well, here, you should read this tweet that I saw out there, and I didn't. So I didn't see the notice. Oh, I'm not going to be there. That's what you should talk about. I would talk about it normally. You should, because I have no electric power. So
anyway,
anyway,
you have to open up the individual you're talking to see all the messages. Yeah. So otherwise,
oh my God, what did we do before the days of? I don't know. We didn't have anything before that one. But
well, Twitter is another story altogether.
Yes.
Jimmy Fallon did a nice little bit on Elon Musk the other day. And he basically pointed out that Elon Musk has invited Donald Trump back to Twitter, and Trump hasn't taken him up on it.
Yeah.
And Fallon's theory is that he can't be on 2 failing sites at once.
No, it's not possible.
It's just too much for him.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, he's dedicated to making his a thing. I don't think it ever will become a thing. And I mean, it's the one shrewd part of the whole thing, I think, by Elon Musk but I don't see how it makes any money. But I mean, it's shrewd to say, all right, well, we'll let Trump back on, but he won't come back here anyway. So, and if he does, great, triumph for us and screw him. I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things is that although he's going to allow Trump back on, if Trump wishes, and I'm not sure Trump wishes, because it will hurt financially Truth Social if, in fact, he comes back to Twitter. Because, what's the point of having Truth Social if he's on Twitter?
Nobody would, right.
But at the same time, he's not allowing Alex Jones on.
Oh, I thought he was.
Which is rather interesting. And it's not clear why he's not allowing Alex Jones on. But my theory is that he's afraid of lawsuits. And I don't mean just that. Sandy Hook families would immediately sue Elon Musk for having Alex Jones on. What I mean is that Twitter is facing a bunch of lawsuits already because a corporation is supposed to do due diligence and follow regulations, and he fired everybody who keeps track of that.
Oh.
So,
well, yeah.
For example, Twitter is in many countries besides the United States, and German law says you can't really have Nazis on.
Yes.
And it's, you have to remove illegal content from Nazis. And Twitter isn't doing it, and so now they're afoul of German law. And German IT law firm, June IT Rechtsanwälte, has a hearing coming up on Thursday. I have no idea if that's really how I pronounce it.
I don't know.
It reads like Gotterdammerung, you know. So for Elon Musk. And, you know, we'll see, because he's going to have to respond to that. And other European countries may be just as firm in terms of you're not allowed to do that. And if you just have to kick the Nazis off, it isn't because of U.S. law.
Yeah,
it's because of European law.
Yeah. Well, I noticed that's a popular rule for Mastodon servers, that you can't violate German
law. Well, a lot
of
them are based in Europe.
Well, then that's part of the issue. Then and others are just, right. I think, borrowing their anti-Nazi
Twitter
law.
has one service, and you sign up, and you can follow anybody, and everybody follows you, and you can see all your information on places like TweetDeck, kind of all in one place.
Yeah.
And Mastodon is more like joining a Facebook group. You're on that group, but you don't necessarily see all the information right away from other groups unless you also join those other groups. So once you pick a server, or any,
I think you can.
What do they call it? Incidents?
Yes. Something like that.
Then you're going to see generically all the stuff from that particular area, but you're not going to see everything. If you want to see everything, you have to duplicate the people you follow. And that's a lot of work. And it doesn't have anything close to the feel of Twitter in regard to being able to sign on and immediately see. Right. In my case, I look for journalists, scientists, doctors, historians, medieval historians in particular, and things I otherwise find interesting. And I can see it all in one place. And to recreate that on Mastodon is nearly impossible. It'll take a while to get something akin to it.
Yeah, I think it
but
can
at the same, the flip side is it's a safe space to talk, and it's much more interactive in regarding discussion. So if you want to go there and chat with people in your like-minded group, Mastodon's the thing for you. If you wanted to just use it as your way to curate and look for news from large groups of people in different spheres, not quite as useful. It's never going to replace Twitter.
Yeah, it's going to
Which
take
is
a
why
while.
I haven't left Twitter yet, even though Elon Musk is not exactly my idea of an ideal I'm trying to live up to.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how I've been looking at it. I think with time it can be hammered into something that people want to use similar
It might
to
be
Twitter.
good enough. You know, I'm trying Post News, which is a different place. Post News, you have to be put on a waiting list in order to get in.
Wow.
And right now that waiting list is 105,000 as of this morning.
I would just clear the whole list.
Right. Well, it's just doubtful that you're going to get in before Thanksgiving is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, join something else. I don't know.
All I know, there's like 3 guys who are looking at the list. And,
and one of them's a turkey.
10 a day.
They don't have a ham. So, yeah, I find it, I think I could see how it could improve. I think I need to spend some time, well, I guess what I ought to do is I go in and follow everybody who's willing to follow me, and then my news feed will grow faster, and I'll see more action, and then I'll have some better understanding of, all right, well, who do I want to add as follows from there? And I was afraid to just follow everybody, and I thought everything would explode, and I wouldn't be able to find anything. But I find it a little slow.
Twitter hasn't exploded, and it probably won't for a while. It's going to fail eventually. But I'm not sure what the context is. It may be that Elon gets so many lawsuits he decides to sell the damn thing. I really don't know. Or maybe Tesla recalls make that company go first and takes Twitter with it. I don't know.
They have had some problems. Tesla.
I do know that if when I post on Daily Kos and I put a pundit roundup together, I almost invariably add tweets because it's a way of getting a lot of information packed into a small space.
Yeah.
And so ever since Elon bought the company, Twitter, some of the commenters have been yelling at me, why are you on Twitter? You shouldn't use Twitter. Not only is it addictive, but Elon Musk is terrible, and don't. And, my reaction to that is usually, I don't really like being told what to do or what not to do, first of all.
People rarely do.
I don't call it cancel culture and go nuts about it. I just ignore you.
Well, that's always been an option.
Right. People were telling me blogging is dead. You shouldn't be blogging.
Stop doing it.
And fine. I know why I do it. I know what value I get out of it, and it's not really up to you, and go away.
All right.
And it's interesting that blogging is dead, except it's all come back again. It's just that it's called Substack and it costs you money.
That's interesting.
I mean, the whole thing is that blogging had a heyday, and then people figured out it was really tough to monetize unless you were really big, like Daily Kos. And so they stopped, and then they figured out how to monetize it by using Substacks, and now they're back. They just don't call it blogging. Because if you call it blogging, then you have to have a bloggers ethics conference or something.
There's never any Substacker at the conference. So,
yep.
All right. Well, they're limping along. I think things will be
well, the point is, I'm
going
to use Twitter the way I feel like, because there's just nothing that's going to replace it in regard to collecting news, which is what I use it for.
Yeah, it's very difficult to see that happening, but I'm gonna make an effort to expand my circle a little bit on Mastodon and give it a chance to do that and see if it works. I guess the other big complaint from people who have migrated over is there's no quote tweet function in Mastodon, and apparently the system architect who designed the thing did it on purpose. And it's his opinion that quote tweets are only used for malicious purposes, essentially. That it's you pointing at somebody at a party and saying, look what that guy just said. He's so terrible. Everybody go get him. And others saying, I feel like that might be in your head.
Yeah, I don't use it that way at all. I quote tweet all the time, and I do it because I want it in my feed.
Yeah,
and I want my comment in my feed.
Yeah.
So everybody in my feed can see it, rather than as a response, which is only going to be seen by the people following that guy.
Yeah, and I wonder if it may be that it comes to be viewed differently. I don't know whether that's anything you can update and change, given the fact that
you just had 1 million new people join Mastodon, and that may not be an exaggeration or much of one.
I think it's not.
And so, how are you going to all of a sudden change things? Each individual server is managed by volunteers.
There might be people who are willing to adopt it on their servers, or I don't know. I'm not certain how that would work, and I have no idea what their person's reaction is going to be. They may say, "Don't tell me what to do," or they may say, "Oh, a lot of new users actually think, all right," and they use it in ways that I don't regard as a problem. Okay, maybe we'll add it, or maybe it's just too late. I guess we'll find out.
Right. Each one of the servers, has different rules, so you can join any one of them. Get on, and then once you find one that's more home-like for you, you can migrate. But again, it's just all these extra steps. And, if you spent literally years, trying to build your list on Twitter so that you have what you wish, it's just not simple to go and recreate that. It's going to be years worth of work, and that's daunting.
It will keep you going.
So I'm not going to do it until I have to.
Okay.
It does also, by the way, Mastodon does allow direct messages, DMs.
Oh, okay.
Which is, on the one hand, good.
Exactly.
And on the other hand, the way they do it is that it's built into the system such that it's really difficult to tell the difference between a regular thing that you wrote and a DM. So you have to be really careful.
Yeah, well,
I thought I was telling you something privately, and it looks like broadcast it to everybody. That's not what I wanted.
Right.
Because I wasn't paying attention. So you have to really closely pay attention to make sure that whatever you say is actually only directed at the person you think you're directing to.
Well, all right, I would say that's wise, but I don't know how you how you tell, so I have no advice for you on that.
Well, when you write a direct message, there's a direct message
I
thing,
don't
so you
wanna
click
know.
on direct message, and then when you're about to send it, there's a lock, a little icon of a lock, slightly to the left of where it says publish.
Hmm.
And if you don't see the lock,
What? Where?
it's not a direct message.
Ooh.
And if you do see the lock, it's only going to that one person.
All right, I'll
But
look
you have
for
to
a
train
lock.
yourself to pay attention.
Right, I'm not doing that.
I don't pay attention. That's my thing. Okay.
Right.
So if
I
that's what
joined
you're asking
the
me to do. I'm
Don't
not
pay
doing it.
attention. Mastodon. I don't
Right.
know.
That's the server I joined.
Dot online.
Right,
Yeah.
right. At
That's-
them from Connecticut at I don't pay attention. Dot social.
On this server, we don't pay attention to that, so watch out.
Right.
All right. Well, we pay attention to news. Have you seen any lately?
I have. So, you were talking about COVID, and there is, it's hard to track information. What we do track, and I think what's probably more relevant at this point because of RSV, flu, and other viruses, is the hospital beds and how the hospitals are doing. Because after all, that was the whole point of any kind of mitigation efforts. It wasn't to keep you from getting COVID. It was to keep COVID down enough so that the hospitals wouldn't collapse.
Right.
So on
They're
the one
still
hand,
there.
that's worth paying attention to. On the other hand, if you look at the gray water, the wastewater, the poop water
Yeah.
from Massachusetts, the one you love to talk about, it turns out there's actually not that much COVID going on around there. So
That's
we're
good.
doing okay in regard to COVID. We're getting clobbered by flu and RSV.
And they don't see that in water? I don't know.
Well, they're not
They're
looking
not
for
looking. Oh, you might. But all right, I'll have to find out whether that's going on. But somebody did say, "Oh well, that's with people not reporting or doing all their home tests, you should be looking at the wastewater." And
Well, I am
like,
looking at it. It
and
doesn't
I'm
look
like,
that
but
bad,
I'm
so
not
that
looking
worried
at
about it, so I'm not spending a lot of
I
time.
guess
with
where
that.
they were, it was an issue, or maybe I didn't read it that closely. Once I saw
Well, not
poop
everybody
water
looks at
in the
wastewater,
tweet, I'm
so-
like, forget it.
I'm looking at Massachusetts for a surrogate for
Right.
Connecticut, but I don't see any Connecticut wastewater.
I'm not looking. But it was the right idea. I'm not going to do it. Yeah.
So I don't know if I really have an hour's worth of material today, but what
That's
I will
okay.
talk about,
We already ate half an
a couple
hour.
of things. First of all, I want to, make mention of the goings on in Colorado, and then I want to talk a little bit about Georgia and what's going on with the runoff.
All right.
But with Colorado, it seems like one of the things we've learned is the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is if a good guy takes the bad guy's gun and beats him senseless with it, but doesn't fire it off.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. There's tremendous reporting on what happened there. And in fact, Darwin has read us the New York Times recounting of that tale. So I've got all the details later on.
Yeah, not going
In his
into
voice.
the details on it, but the fact that it happened at all is just horrendous, and I think the issue there to me is just how much of it flows from the hate-filled rhetoric that we've been seeing around LGBTQI issues plus.
Yeah.
And it
Other things
just
too.
one flows from the other. And Kara Swisher had a interesting commentary about that. She said, only one tweet today since this platform is degenerating in real time, and I don't have the energy for the screaming numpties, but see these two news stories. They are inextricably related. Story number one, at least 5 killed in shooting an LGBTQ club in Colorado Springs. 2 heroic people fought with a suspect. The other was someone in drag who stomped them with high heels.
Yeah.
So between the gun and the high heels, he's got both blunt and puncture injuries.
Yeah. I mean, he really got, well, good. I mean, that's how it should have happened. And I did make me wonder about, what if it turns out that drag queens are the real mama bears taking care of people and taking down the bad guys? Huh.
Right. And story number two, inextricably linked, is Musk restores Trump's Twitter account that was suspended after January 6th. Then she went on to say, I've suspended comments to those who follow me. I can't stomach gay hate.
Okay. It's really another mass shooting, obviously, but what an interesting conclusion to it. And like I said, I'll let Darwin read this tremendous piece to you. But I liked, to the extent you can like anything having to do with a mass shooting, it was very interesting to see that the big wannabe tough guy with the body armor and everything and the gun literally taken down by hand and pummeled nearly to death. I think that the guys who took him down thought, oh, we might have gone a little too far and killed him. Not that would have been a legal problem for them under the circumstances, but I think they wanted him to be able to survive to stand trial. But just how interesting that is, and as it turns out, LARPing the tough guy from Call of Duty doesn't actually make you a soldier. And you can be tackled and pulled down and beaten up whether you have a gun or not, body armor or no. Maybe don't do this stuff.
In the minute or so we have before the break,
yes,
and we're at the break already. Who knew? We started with pandemic, so let me give you this one, and this is from Carl Bergstrom writing in the New York Times. Twitter was influential in the pandemic. Are we better for it? So here we go, combining the two things we were talking about, pandemic and Twitter.
Yeah.
Journalists and policymakers, already heavy Twitter users, sought to track these developments and connect with scientific experts who could help interpret messy and incomplete data on the pandemic. He's a scientist who's an expert in genetics and epidemiology. And so he was one of the people you could reach out to, read to get information, but also contact in regard to, discussing stuff with him, which was great. And he says, imperfect Twitter met those needs. Twitter's gone down in value as people are leaving. So as we consider how social media can serve science and society going forward, we should see how the profit models underpin the whole endeavor. And that's part of the deal.
Well, it really was. It did change, I think, people's reaction to the pandemic, that you could reach out and get expert advice that way.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We realized as we shuffled off to the break that while it was interesting as a concept to be able to reach out and get expert advice during the pandemic, there was also every likelihood that you would get terrible advice from stupid people, but also from experts who also maybe didn't know exactly what the hell was going on. So it wasn't all upside, but there was a lot of potential to it, certainly. I think is how we would describe it. And then we went to commercial and hoped that maybe that was all erased or something.
Well, the good news is that the experts were there to talk to you, and the bad news is they got all sorts of crap from people who didn't believe in it or who didn't do nuance, or who thought that, if I'm describing what I expect to happen next, that's a prediction. And if the prediction doesn't happen, then you have to be treated like a political pollster, and you have to be thoroughly excoriated, if not named and shamed, and all.
Which is amazing.
Why? This is like discussing theoretical stuff, and that's what scientists do. And they were completely unprepared for social media, and a lot of them didn't like it, and so they left.
Well, they were ahead of the curve in that respect. And, you got non-scientists trying to join the scientific discussion and not really knowing what the parameters are.
And scientists not knowing what the parameters of behavior are. And so, you had both. I'm extremely well versed in this. This is exactly what I was talking to CDC about a decade and a half ago, trying to explain to them that you really need to come up to speed on this. because social media is not going away. And then when you get involved in it, you're going to be surprised because it doesn't work the way your academic conferences do. You don't have people stepping up to the microphone and saying, well, this is more a statement than a question, but I just want to tell you about my own research that is irrelevant to what you discussed, but I thought was interesting. And, they're used to that. They're not used to, being doxxed and their address and phone number being broadcast because whoever is doing it didn't like something that they speculated about. And besides, the ending wasn't good, and therefore it must be politics, and you must be a Democrat, and we're going to hate you. And just they're not built for it. They were unprepared for it, and it was messy.
And you can't have mess. I mean, you
can't have mess,
but you got to be ready for it. Okay.
Anyway, so there's that.
All right. Now that we know we have it.
Ben Collins had an interesting segment he did on MSNBC, and he tweeted about it, and he said, I talked this morning about an inflection point in this country right now, specifically for reporters. What are you more afraid of, being on Breitbart for saying trans people deserve to be alive? Or are you more afraid of waking up to the news of more dead people?
Hard to tell.
And he gives examples. NBC News, trans woman's photo used to spread baseless online theory about Uvalde shooter. Boston Children's Hospital faces bomb threat after right-wing harassment campaign. This is, all previous stories from this year, May, August. Doctors providing trans care under increasing threat from far-right harassment campaigns, anti-LGBTQ threats, fueled by Internet's far-right machine, shuts down trans rights and drag events. This is all relevant in terms of what happened in Colorado. And so, again, what Kara Swisher was talking about in terms of Elon Musk, it's not out of a vacuum.
All right. Things really are.
That's why people are upset with no moderation at Twitter, whether you're the scientist, whether you're trans, or whether you're just, a believer in people's rights to be alive. It's a difficult time. And so that goes into the whole zeitgeist of, how things feel. Holidays are coming up, so hope. And and again, you got to talk to family. That's both good and bad. Mostly good, occasionally bad. You got to travel. That's not great. And so there's a little bit of anxiety about what happens next. It doesn't feel like everything is turned around, is in the right direction, but at the same time, very positive stuff in the election, at least for us, and more positive stuff to come. So the next set of things I wanted to talk about is what's going on in Georgia.
All right.
And it turns out there's a new polls from Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Georgia Senate runoff poll points to challenges for Walker and Warnock. New poll focusing on the December 6th runoff, which is exactly 2 weeks from today. So,
it's Tuesday. That's right. Okay. Yeah,
and they find
2 weeks,
that Warnock is up over Walker at this particular point in time, 51-47. So, he's doing well, Warnock is. And the general thought is that he's probably the favorite, nothing to be taken for granted for a variety of reasons. I would point out that at this particular point in time, for the general election, it was essentially a tie. 538 actually had Walker ever so slightly ahead by like a point, but that's because the area was flooded with polls from Trafalgar and Insider Advantage. And so, it was difficult to really figure out exactly where things stand. When we looked at early voting information, one has to remember that this time around, the early voting information is going to be quite different. And that's because the early voting period is so much shorter.
Okay.
And, I don't think there's a Sunday vote, but if there is, in Georgia, every district does it differently. So in addition to the poll showing that Warnock is up 51, Walker 47, I wanted to add a couple of things from stuff we do know from the general election. These are exit polls for the Georgia Senate seat in the midterm. Okay. And this is the only one I have available is age-related data, which is really interesting. And the thing that, in addition to race and gender, you have to keep in mind when it comes to seeing what's going on here. 18 to 24-year-olds voted for Warnock over Walker, 69 to 28.
Nice, as they say. All right.
25 to 29-year-olds voted for Warnock, 57 to 40 over Walker.
All right. Slightly
30 to
nice.
39-year-olds, 57 to 40.
Okay.
40 to 49-year-olds, 52 to 46.
Okay.
50 to 64-year-olds, 44 to 54 for Walker. Okay.
Why?
And
You
65
saw the
and
USFL.
up, 41% for Warnock and 58% for Walker. The older you are,
Amazing.
the more you're going to vote Republican no matter what.
I guess, although maybe it's just the white people are the oldest in that state. I have no idea. That's a lot. I mean, honestly, where are the elderly people who respect preachers?
They're
What happened
in
to
New
them?
York.
I guess they're, well, they're the 44%. I mean, that's still a lot of people. But, yeah, and shame on you if you're old enough to remember the USFL and vote for Herschel Walker.
Yeah.
Honestly. Okay. I mean, he was all right. The rest of the league was terrible. But
So when you start to see the early vote statistics come in, they don't tell you what party, but absolutely positively look to see if the white-black ratio is such that black vote is anywhere close to 29-30%. Look to see if females dominate over males. Look to see if the age in the early vote for the general election that took place that led to the runoff, half of the voters that voted early were over 65. And you know what we just said about over 65s.
Yeah, they did the wrong thing. They
did the wrong thing. So if it turns out that younger voters who are far more likely to support Warnock, like by 29 points or so, according to that new poll out from AJC.
Yeah.
But there aren't as many of them. The over 50s,
Gotta get some more.
they support Walker by like 6 points, really. Something like that.
Yeah.
But there's so many more of them that generally vote.
Yes.
Point being that if younger people actually do turn out like they did for the general election and like they did in a lot of the swing states, then Warnock will win. And if the kids don't show up, then Warnock's going to lose.
Well, I worry that, I don't know
we
what
always
it really
worry they don't
means.
show up, but
right,
for the past 3 or 4 elections, they have.
They have.
And so
I
once
worry
you start
about
getting
these
to the
runoffs.
habit of showing up, you show up. And once you start showing up, you can't say, yeah, but what if they don't show up? Why would they show up? They just showed up for the last 5 elections.
Now, what worries me is the runoff situation where I wonder whether, what's the age group? Well, right. And what's the age group that's most likely to say, what? We had to vote again? What? We just did. And really have tuned out.
And the answer is, and something that this well-known and something that this publicized and something that dumps so much money into it, the answer is none of those groups.
Okay, good. I hope not. They should all be paying attention.
Now, they may not all come
except
out
maybe
like a
the terrible
presidential
people.
election, but they'll all show.
All right. Well, that's fine, I think, except maybe show like it's a presidential election, if you can. But all right,
so,
well, I just
early
hope
in
that
person.
doesn't
What do we know?
become a
We
factor.
know early voting runs in every county at a minimum from Monday, November 28th through Friday, December 2nd.
All right.
Right? In other words,
and you're what, suing
it
for
doesn't
more?
even start till next Monday.
Oh.
And then it's done by Saturday.
So, yeah, that worries me a little bit, too, just compressed
So you
schedule.
got a week. There's 1 week of early voting
Right.
this next week, and Thanksgiving is Thursday.
I figure
then,
you find out on Wednesday, and then you go, oh, my God, and then you're busy on Saturday. What happened? You got to go right away as soon as you hear about it.
Right. So I don't know how much early vote there's going to be, but people wanted to be able to vote on Saturday. Brad Raffensperger said, well, the way I interpret state law is that because Thanksgiving is Thursday, and then there's a holiday that used to be a Confederate holiday, but it isn't.
What?
That therefore you can't vote on Saturday.
Wow. What was that holiday?
I don't even know. And the Democrats challenged that in court. And Raffensperger said, hey, look, it's not that I don't want people to. I know you're accusing me of voter suppression.
Look that up.
I would like people to vote.
Oh, really?
But, what can I do? It's a state law. And so the Democrats challenged it.
Confederate holidays.
Said, no, you have to have them vote. And Raffensperger said, well, we're going to appeal that. And then you scratch your head and say, he sounds like Frank Rose in Ohio, who's the Ohio Secretary of State, about drop boxes and everything else. I don't want to suppress the vote by not allowing it to happen in various areas that would be favorable to Democrats and therefore favoring Republicans overall. I'm just forced to by state law. Well, the law doesn't say that. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. Well, then you're not really doing it because you're forced to. You're doing it because you want to. Why don't you just say that? Even the good Republicans who don't believe in stop the steal certainly have no problem with a little bit more subtle voter suppression.
Okay.
There's no question in my mind that that's what Kemp did in his last election. This one, he won, by a pretty big margin, so it didn't matter. But there's all sorts of ways to practice voter suppression and still have a lot of people show up. And the whole idea is, well, a lot of people showed up, therefore there couldn't have been voter suppression. No, it just meant that there were barriers that people jumped over. But they're yelling at you for setting up the barriers, not that, well, you made that person not finish the race. Well, they finished the race, but they had to do it with a handicap. That's not right. That's not fair. Other people didn't have that handicap. You're getting called on it. You should fix it. It's still voter suppression. And we know that it isn't because you're forced to, because now you made this conscious choice to go ahead and do an appeal. Well, that appeal lost as well, at least the first one.
Well, that's
so
good.
There will be voting on Saturday. But how much a difference it makes in a early vote situation where you only had about 5 days anyway, I don't know.
I don't know either. And I'd love to
so
know
that's
what
why nobody really
Confederate
knows
holiday
they
they think it is, but that's amazing. First of all, when did the Confederates have time to declare holidays? They existed for 4 years, and they were having a war the whole time. Pay attention to the war. Forget the holidays.
Right.
I don't know what they think. Whatever. I don't know. They got weird ideas there. I'll tell you. You Georgians, cut that out.
So
I can't find out what it is
now. This was updated last night. Georgia Appellate Court allows Saturday voting ahead of U.S. Senate runoff. The appeal could determine if voters will be allowed to cast ballots on November 26, which would be the coming Saturday after Thanksgiving. The court denied emergency motions from the state of Georgia, the Georgia Republican Party, the Republican National Committee, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee Monday evening. That was last night.
Yeah, they got that done.
State and Republican groups were seeking to overturn a Fulton County Superior Court. So there's a Superior Court, there's a Court of Appeals. I don't know, is there a Supreme Court?
Pretty awesome court. Right in between that and Supreme Court.
11 Alive is working to learn more in the details, including whether the state can or will appeal to the Georgia Supreme Court. So there's one more appeal to go. But the fact that Georgia keeps appealing it gives the lie to the idea that they're only being forced to because they have no choice.
Yeah, I have no choice but to keep writing these briefs. You should
have there.
Right. Okay, Brad Raffensperger, compared to Donald Trump, did the right-ish thing, but it always sounded to me like he was kind of interested in maybe doing the wrong thing if he could get away with it. As long as there's meddling kids around, he won't do the things that Trump wanted him to do. But if you're looking the other way, he might try to suppress your vote after all.
Right.
Boo for Brad Raffensperger. Okay.
All right. And the last thing, a couple of last things. There's always a last thing.
All right.
I always think I'm done, and then, it's 10 o'clock.
This is great.
Putting
my feet up
here.
Yes.
So you can look around and say, it's 10 o'clock. I only have an hour to do.
Nice.
So 2 Arizona counties already are delaying certification of 2022 election results. You may recall Carrie Lake refuses to concede. 2 rural Arizona counties have voted to delay certifying the ballot canvases as some of the GOP claim voters were disenfranchised. Cochise County, a Republican-leaning area in the state's southeastern corner, it's a tiny county, delayed its certification on Friday after 3 conspiracy theorists claimed the county's vote counting machine wasn't certified.
Was it?
They convinced Cochise's 2 Republican supervisors to delay certifying the results until a November 28th deadline in a 2-to-1 vote. So by November 28th, they have to. It's one of those stupid things. Okay, you're delaying it 6 days because why?
You want to.
Because you want to.
Then we report on the 28th because you have to.
Arizona Elections Director Corey Lorick. So there's a Corey, a Carrie, and a Kerry.
Got it.
It's Kelly Ward, who's the Georgia party leader, who's terrible. There's Carrie Lake, who's the Georgia gubernatorial candidate, who's terrible.
Arizona, yeah.
And there's Corey Lorick, also with a K, who's good. She refuted the allegations at Friday's meeting, detailing that although the labs used to test voting machines didn't receive updated certification ahead of the midterms, the U.S. Elections Assistance Commission has confirmed they were in compliance. Lorick called it an administrative error. The equipment used in Cochise County is properly certified under both federal and state laws and requirements, and the fact that they're not properly accredited is a false charge. She went on to note that the men who spoke at Friday's meeting had filed similar claims in court, but the Arizona Supreme Court rejected the arguments.
All right.
In Mojave County, which is located in Arizona's northwestern corner, the 5 Republicans who compromised the Board of Supervisors delayed their certification in a split vote yesterday. Okay. Did you hear me say many times that there's never a perfect election, never will be? Alan Tempert, the county's elections director, told the supervisors just the way it's the nature of the beast, but this was a very successful election. The supervisors who voted for the delay praised his handling, instead framing the decision as a political statement of solidarity after some in the GOP raised concerns after voting in Maricopa County.
Oh, solidarity meaning.
So in solidarity
leave us in office
with that other district and some other area that has nothing to do with what we do, we're not doing our job. But we're going to have to in 6 days anyway, so it's performative.
Yeah, you may throw us out if we do our job correctly. So in solidarity with staying in this job, we will throw a bone to the conspiracy theorists and certify later instead of now.
Right. Supervisor Gene Bishop called the move kind of ludicrous at the meeting, all Republican. We're not Maricopa County, we're Mojave County. Our vote is solid, our canvas is solid. Whether or not it's today or Monday, it's going to be the same, so we're good.
I like that. That's an interesting blame shifting thing. We're not Maricopa County, which, by the way, is doing fine.
Yeah.
But okay.
Anyway, Katie Hobbs is still the winner.
Blame the city. The big city. Okay.
Right. So 70 of 223 voting centers experienced a printing issue, but deny any citizens were denied an opportunity to vote. What happened is that the setting was such that when it printed, the printing gave you a sheet that was too light for the readers to read. At least at the specific place in Maricopa, and therefore they had to be taken elsewhere. They were dropped in something that became to be known as Box 3. Okay. So you may have heard that as the election was going on, and we're getting Maricopa incoming from Garrett Archer, the guru. Were these Box 3? Because they should have been really favorable to Carrie Lake. Well, all the Box 3 has already been counted, so no, it's not Box 3. It's just regular old Maricopa incoming from a different area.
I was wondering about that because this terribly written report I was reading yesterday just referred to printing errors delaying counting. And I was like, how could printing errors delay the counting? They're two different things. Now I see. There's always a reason.
Yeah. You
just have to say it. And you do.
There's that. So Carrie Lake, basically I think that Shapiro, Republican, Josh Shapiro, who's the Democrat who beat the Republican Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, referring to his Republican opponent, not conceding, had the best response to all of this. So if Carrie Lake doesn't want to concede, Katie Hobbs can say the same thing. Who cares whether he lost?
Yeah, right. I mean,
people have spoken. That's what matters.
Right. So, okay, moving past them. They don't concede. All right, well, bye.
And you haven't heard a word about Mastriano since, so who cares? So, Carrie Lake is a lot noisier and gets a lot more favorable coverage, but Katie Hobbs should say the same thing. She lost, that's it.
Yeah, and even if she doesn't say it, that's
right. And then the really final story I have here is from Marcy Weir, Empty Wheel, just to remind me to cover it, but she has an intriguing thing to offer. What if the special counsel that Merrick Garland appointed to look into Donald Trump,
fake name guy,
is about Scott Perry, not Trump, or not just Trump?
Scott Perry. Okay.
Scott Perry is the Pennsylvania congressman who was part of the Stop the Steal movement, was it January 6th?
Right.
I think he's the one that introduced to Donald Trump the assistant who was trying to take over the Justice Department.
Right. Yes, I think that
warrior
might be
whose name escapes me.
Yeah, thankfully we're finally forgetting his name. Yeah, all right. Well, we remember that guy. Good. I'm glad I don't remember his name. Not really.
And what if the special counsel is about Scott Perry? When he announced the appointment of his special counsel yesterday, Merrick Garland described that recent developments, plural, led him to conclude he should appoint Jack Smith as special counsel to oversee the investigations into Donald Trump. The recent developments he focused on were presidential, Trump's announcement, Joe Biden's stated plan to run also, but he also described the basis for the appointment not as a conflict, but as extraordinary circumstance. Unsurprisingly, Garland never named Trump as the reason. The only time he referred to Trump, he referred to him as the former president. That's DOJ policy. When he described the subjects of the January 6th investigation, he included any person, but also any entity that interfered in the transfer of power.
Entity. All right.
The scope of the January 6th investigation that Smith will oversee is far broader than Trump and will almost certainly lead to the indictment of multiple people, in addition to Trump, if it doesn't include Trump, people like Jeffrey Clark. That's who it is.
The guy. Yes. I found out. I actually Googled Trump Justice Department takeover guy. Yeah, all the Jeffs. You're all under arrest.
John Eastman and possibly Mark Meadows. But if we assume that everybody who's had their phone seized in the investigation is a subject, then that includes Scott Perry, chair of the House Freedom Caucus. Perry was the one who suggested Trump replace Rosen with Jeffrey Clark. That part I remembered. So DOJ would endorse Trump's challenges to the election outcome. He pushed a number of conspiracy theories at the White House and DOJ, including the whack Italian one.
The Italian military
satellites.
Yes.
I forget which one that one.
Hey,
Along with Meadows and
monitoring
Giuliani, Perry was putting together plans for Trump to come to the Capitol on January 6th. After one meeting with Perry, Meadows burned some papers. And Perry isn't even the only one who was closely involved in the plot. Jim Jordan was closely involved and is close to likely subject Mark Meadows. But if you include all the members of Congress who discussed or asked for pardons, then that includes, in addition to Perry, Matt Gaetz, Andy Biggs, Louis Gohmert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Murdery.
Jordan, Perry, Gaetz, Biggs, Gohmert, and Marge would amount to most of the probable 7-person majority in the House.
Oh, yeah.
So Marge, as it turns out, is already dreaming up ways to fund the investigation. But to be clear, Perry's the only one whose actions have overtly been the focus of the legal process. So interesting stuff. And then, keep that in mind. Well, how come he hasn't just, maybe that's why.
Yeah, maybe, although I don't know.
It doesn't mean you can't do it, but it gets complicated if you're also looking at members of Congress.
I'm not certain how great a metric, if you've had your phone seized, is. I mean,
it's pretty
good.
Not routine for a member of Congress to have their phone seized.
That's true. Yeah, for members of Congress, certainly, that is something.
I mean, John Eastman is one thing, but to have a member of Congress get your phone seized, you must have done something pretty interesting to make DOJ argue to a judge that it's really a good idea.
Although those are our phones, damn it. We paid for them.
Did we?
In many cases. I mean, I don't know whether he had his personal phones. But if he has his official
Mark Meadows
seized,
always used 2 phones simultaneously.
Right.
That was part of the stuff we learned during the January 6th committee.
He looked like he just wanted to walk around saying, buy, sell.
Yeah. I don't have to talk to you. I have a phone in each ear. Yes, I can't hear you. I have a phone in each ear. They're not on. It doesn't matter. They're in my ear. I didn't say I was talking on them. They're actually
right. I'm just holding them over the ear holes so I don't have to hear you. All right. Well, that is interesting and intriguing. We'll follow that. What else are you going to do? We have to sit here and wait for news. I actually found Jeffrey Clark's name. In case you were wondering, can I Google? I've answered the question. Can you just Google literally Trump Justice Department takeover guy and get the name? The answer is yes, Jeffrey Clark, and it comes up in the first hit. So that's nice. Good old Google. I think I'll buy it and destroy it.
So, again, still a lot of... since they haven't counted the voting, and we don't exactly know, probably 222, but the number of seats that the Republicans will have in the new Congress, and we don't therefore know at what percentage point did the Republicans win the popular ballot. How does that compare to the generic ballot, with or without the Trafalgars of the world included? We don't know a lot of all of that stuff, but there's still plenty of space to argue about what mattered. This is the old victory had 1,000 fathers, but defeat is an orphan.
Okay.
So why did the Democrats win? Well, it was the kids It was abortion. It was massive amounts of money and the right ads in the right places, but only in the swing states. And otherwise, it was a complete wipeout for the Democrats, because how can all of those things happen at the same time? And the answer is depends where you look. And so why did the Democrats win? Which reason? All of them, Katie.
I guess. And then, of course, it's still difficult to even discuss it in terms of the win, knowing that the control of the House turns over. I understand, overperformance and everything, but it's very interesting, and I love it. I'm glad this narrative goes the other way so often that Democrats win many more seats, but then speak about things in terms of a Republican victory. I love that this is they're taking over the House, and the whole framing is about Democratic victory.
It is.
It's
and
terrific.
In fact, not only that, they're taking over the House, but it's all about Republican infighting, both in Senate and in the House.
Yeah, it's great.
Plus,
I mean,
as
good as
when
it can
we
be.
won last time, and when we won the time before that,
yes,
especially the size of the Democratic win rolled out so slowly, because of the time it takes to count, that it didn't have the, oh my gosh, look at the massive number of wins that we had.
Yes.
It was like, oh, well, they
recall
didn't
that
do as
now.
well as expected. Well, they picked up one here, and then a couple of days later, one there, and then another week, then one there, thanks to California. And they never got the acknowledgement of the size of the win. This time,
Yeah, that's right.
they were expecting 60.
about that.
They got 4.
Yeah.
So we know that, however many they wind up with.
Right, that's true. So, all right, I'm glad it broke our way for once. I forgot all about the fact that there was this sort of silent victory, that we were deprived of our parade, I guess. So, all right, good. So much the better. I feel perfectly justified in celebrating this one. Thanks, Greg. Glad you could come by today.
Tomorrow?
Yeah, maybe.
We'll talk. We'll talk up.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We have our next hour to go. Now, maybe now is a good time to roll this thing that I got from Darwin, who read the tough article, the difficult one to get through, and I'm glad that he decided to read this one. I saw this last night. Many of you probably saw it as well. It was in the New York Times, so I was pleased to have Darwin don his senior military correspondent hat to read this one. This is a tough one to read, but a very interesting story and rich detail and important detail about this shooting. And I saw lots of commentary out there in the various social media platforms about the meaning of this, the fact that the shooter had been taken down. Of course, people making references to Uvalde and hundreds of armed police officers being unwilling to take this risk and do this thing, whereas unarmed patrons at this bar were able to do it. And I suppose it's different being in the middle of the shooting and you're having no alternative versus, I guess, although really, honestly, I guess we learned so much about the myth of the police officer and the police response from Uvalde. And the fact that there were literally hundreds of them just makes it astonishing that none of them did anything. I really, honestly, you gather a group of several hundred people, and it's very difficult to predict how any of them will act, and that they would all act in unison to not act for a very long time just is remarkable all by itself. Just keeping that kind of discipline is amazing. And I guess they almost didn't keep it, but in the end they did. Anyway, between this and just the general idea of here's your fantasy role playing crazy guy who I guess wannabe military figure who dresses up in tactical gear and then rushes into a place and thinks, I don't know, who knows what he's thinking at the time, but is going to shoot the place up and thinks he's, the ultimate soldier. And as it turns out, people who really have been soldiers are trained to some extent in what to do here. And although no one can really apply everything that they know to this sort of civilian shooting situation, the guy they're talking about, the guy they're profiling here, goes into, he's an ex-military and goes into military mode, but it's also pretty clear in the aftermath that it's not entirely best suited to the civilian atmosphere, but you take what you can get at that point, and of course, lives having been saved, that's enough. But anyway, I just thought it was very interesting that put a gun in your hands and put on the tactical gear, and the guy probably entered the place with something of a feeling of invincibility, and it turns out that tactical vest, AR-15, if someone can get in close to you and punch you in the face, we always repeat the old line from Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, tactical gear doesn't stop people from punching you in the face. It can still happen. It's hard to get close enough to punch somebody in the face when they've got an AR-15, to be sure. But, you'll hear how this goes down, and it's interesting enough in that respect. All right, why don't I just roll it and get it going here. I have to remember where I put it here. All right. Thanks again to Darwin Darko, who has not yet made the switch to Mastodon, but is probably contemplating it at some point in the near future, or unless he can get us all to move to Reddit, I think, which was his preferred alternative. We'll let him take it away from here.
Hi there, David. First of all, I want to start off by saying that this is a tough read, so this is my trigger warning for anyone who is not in that current headspace. You might want to skip forward maybe 5-10 minutes. David will tell you the exact time. But this is Darwin _Darko coming to you as the senior military correspondent this time. So I caught wind of this article rather early. Don't know exactly how, but it's from the New York Times. And I think I will be doing the world a favor by reading this, especially because, this is your chance to get the entire article for free without the subscription. This article is written by Dave Phillips. It's very compelling. He calls it "The Army Veteran Went into Combat Mode to Disarm the Club Q Gunman." In Colorado Springs, Richard M. Furrow was at a table in Club Q with his wife, daughter, and friends on Saturday, watching a drag show, when the sudden flash of gunfire ripped across the nightclub, and instincts forged during 4 combat deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan instantly kicked in. Fight back, he told himself. Protect yourself. In an interview at his house on Monday, where his wife and daughter were still recovering from injuries, Mr. Fierro, 45, who spent 15 years as an Army officer and left as a major in 2013, according to military records, described charging through the chaos at the club, tackling the gunman, and beating him bloody with the gunman's own gun. "I don't know exactly what I did. I just went into combat mode," Mr. Fierro said, shaking his head as he stood in his driveway, an American flag hanging limp in the freezing air. "I just know I have to kill this guy before he kills us." The authorities are holding Anderson Lee Aldrich, 22, on charges of killing 5 people and say that 18 more people were injured in a rampage at the club that lasted only a few minutes. The death toll could have been much higher, officials said on Sunday, if patrons of the bar had not stopped the gunman. "He saved a lot of lives," Mayor John Souther said of Mr. Fierro. The mayor said he had spoken to Mr. Fierro and was struck by his humility. "I have never encountered a person who engaged in such heroic actions and was so humble about it." It was supposed to be a chill family night out. The combat veteran and his wife, Jess, joined their daughter, Cassandra, her longtime boyfriend, Raymond Green Vance, and 2 family friends to watch one of his daughter's friends perform a drag show. It was Mr. Fierro's first time at a drag show, and he was digging it. He had spent 15 years in the Army and now relished his role as a civilian and a father, watching one of his daughter's old high school friends perform. "These kids want to live that way, want to have a good time. Have at it," he said, as he described the night. "I'm happy about it because that is what I fought for. so they can do whatever the hell they want. Mr. Fierro was trying to get better at going out. In Iraq and Afghanistan, he'd been shot at, seen roadside bombs shred trucks in his platoon, and lost friends. He was twice awarded the Bronze Star. The wars were both past and still present. There were things he would never forget. For a long time after coming home, crowds put him on edge. He couldn't help but to be vigilant. In restaurants, he sat against the wall facing the door. No matter how much he tried to relax, part of him was always ready for an attack, like an itch that could not be scratched. He was too often distrustful, quick to anger. It had been hell on his wife and daughter. He was working on it. There was medication and sessions with psychologists. He got rid of all the guns in the house. He grew his hair out and grew a long white goatee to distance himself from his days in uniform. He and his wife ran a successful local brewery called Ultra Vita Beer Company, and he had a warm relationship with his daughter and her longtime boyfriend. But he also accepted that war would always be with him. But that night, at Club Q, he wasn't thinking of war at all. The women were dancing, he was joking with his friends. Then the shooting started. It was a staccato of flashes by the door, the familiar sound of small arms fire. Mr. Fierro knew it too well. He hit the floor, pulling his friend down with him. Bullets sprayed across the bar, smashing bottles and glasses. People screamed. Mr. Fierro looked up and saw a figure as big as a bear, easily more than 300 pounds, wearing body armor and carrying a rifle, a lot like the one he used to carry in Iraq. The shooter was moving through the bar toward a door leading to a patio where dozens of people had fled. The long suppressed instincts of a platoon leader surged back into life. He raced across the room, grabbed the gunman by a handle on the back of his body armor, pulled him to the floor, and jumped on top of him. Was he shooting at that time? Was he about to shoot? I don't know, Mr. Fierro said. I just knew I had to take him down. The two crashed to the floor. The gunman's military-style rifle clattered just out of reach. Mr. Fierro started to go for it, but then saw the gunman come up with a pistol in his own hand. I grabbed the gun out of his hand and just started hitting him in the head over and over, Mr. Fierro said. As he held the man down and slammed the pistol down on his skull, Mr. Fierro started barking orders. He yelled for another club patron using a string of expletives to grab the rifle and then told the patron to start kicking the gunman in the face. A drag dancer was passing by. Mr. Fierro said he ordered her to stomp the attacker with her heels. The whole time, Mr. Fierro said he kept on pummeling the shooter with the pistol and while screaming obscenities. What allowed him to throw aside all fear and act? He said he has no idea. Probably those old instincts of war that had burdened him for so long at home suddenly had a place now that something like war had come to his hometown. In combat, most of the time nothing happens, but it's that mad minute, and you are tested in that minute. It becomes habit, he said. I don't know how I got the weapon away from that guy, no idea. I'm just a dude. I'm a fat old vet, but I knew I had to do something. When police arrived a few minutes later, the gunman was no longer struggling. Mr. Fierro said he feared that he had killed him. Mr. Fierro was covered in blood. He got up and frantically lurched in the dark looking for his family. He spotted his friends on the floor. One had been shot several times in the chest and arm. Another had been shot in the leg. As more police filed in, Mr. Fierro said he started yelling like he was back in combat. Casualties! Casualties! I need a medic here now! He yelled at the police that the scene was clear. The shooter was down, but people needed help. He said he took tourniquets from a young police officer and put them on his bleeding friends. He said he tried to speak calmly to them as he worked, telling them they would be okay. He spied his wife and daughter on the edge of the room and was about to go for them when he was tackled. Officers rushing into the chaotic scene had spotted a blood-splattered man with a handgun, not knowing if he was the threat. They put him in handcuffs and locked him in the back of a police car for what seemed like more than an hour. He said he screamed and pleaded to be let go so that he could see his family. Eventually he was freed. He went to the hospital with his wife and daughter, who had only minor injuries. His friends were there, and they are still there in much more serious condition. They are all alive. But the daughter's boyfriend was nowhere to be found. In the chaos, they had lost him. They drove back to the club, searched for him. They circled familiar streets, hoping they would find him walking home, but there was nothing. The family got a call late Sunday from his mother. He had died in the shooting. When Mr. Fierro heard, he said he held his daughter and cried. In part, he cried because he knew what lay ahead. The families of the dead, the people who were shot, had now been in war like he had. They would struggle like he and so many of his combat buddies had. They would ache with misplaced vigilance. They would lash out in anger, never be able to scratch the itch of fear, be torn by the longing to forget and the urge to always remember. My little girl, she screamed and I was crying with her, he said. Driving home from the hospital, I told them, look, I've gone through this before, and downrange, when this happens, you just get out on the next patrol. You need to get it out of your mind. That is how you cured it. You cured it by doing more. Eventually, you get home safe. But here, I worry there is no next patrol. It is harder to cure. You're already home. Thanks for listening. This is Darwin_Darko, still on Twitter while it lasts. Back to you, David.
No, thanks, Darwin. And I realize now, I remembered too late that, oh yes, right, there was the admonition that I was supposed to warn you for how long the piece would be rolling, but 10 minutes was a good guess, and it turned out to be 10 minutes after all. So if you needed to jump out, I can understand that, although I didn't find it, different things are triggering to different people. I didn't find it that triggering to me myself, but of course I don't come from the same experience there. And I guess to a certain extent, years of following gun stories and gun violence fairly closely has numbed me to some of it, I guess. Anyway, like I said, I found the whole thing sort of fascinating, the idea of disproving the stupid notion that only a good guy with a gun can take care of a bad guy with a gun. I mean, it would probably tend to go better, or in some cases, the good guy with the gun might feel better about his intervention. But the guy was wearing body armor, so it really kind of called for close-in, nearly hand-to-hand combat, if nothing else. I mean, you might have been able to shoot at him with a handgun and take him down by the legs, but who knows? I don't know. But also, interesting thing, over the years, just seeing people's reactions to, or discussions about how they would react if they could predict how they would react in such a situation. There are some weird and strange vulnerabilities that sometimes only people trained in combat know about, attacking a tactical armor-wearing target from behind, that you would even know that there is a handle there that you can grab onto, I guess, in some versions of body armor. But there's always that, body armor fitting like that rigid vest. You can always kind of grab at the bottom of the neck scoop from the back and pull down. And people who show up at protests, etc., wearing riot gear, wearing helmets and things, anticipating violence and going in this makeshift armor to give themselves this feeling of invulnerability. I had seen, somebody, a martial arts type trained person who was pointing out, if you're fighting for your life against people like this and they're wearing those helmets, and if you're fortunate enough to approach them from behind, but I guess if you're even face to face in combat with them, that the helmet protects their head from blunt force trauma, but it's also a handle that you can grab onto and kind of manipulate them, their bodies, and you can take them down by either the by grabbing onto the headgear and getting your fingers under the sides of the helmet or on the straps of the helmet, and you can kind of throw them around like the reins of a horse, really, if you got the straps of the helmet, and it's kind of a vulnerability, really. And you're supposed to be trained when you're wearing those things that you got to make sure and hand-to-hand combat of it, that you can't let anybody, just generally speaking, helmet or not, you can't let anybody get their hands up around your face and neck. It's a pretty dangerous place for them to be. You want to defend against that. But not all the live-action role-playing type people have gotten that training, and I don't have that training. I just happen to have read about the need for that training along the way. Anyway, very interesting article and very interesting commentary that has surrounded the emergence of this story. First of all, I guess I did see somebody on, now I don't even know whether it was Twitter or Mastodon, but making some comment that I guess clearer information is becoming available about the other people who helped out with Mr. Fierro's effort to fight back, and that it maybe wasn't a drag performer who was wearing the heels who stomped on him, but rather just a trans woman who happened to have dangerous-looking heels. So I don't think anybody's offended by the mistake, but just in terms of getting things correct. But, I don't know how well verified that information is, just it's out there. So in case you heard it too and thought that there should be a correction on the record, it's there. But then some very interesting comments, I think, that were made along the way. The first one being someone else's comment, and let me see if I can grab it because I just saw it recently retweeted again. It was David Mack, who made the comment, a BuzzFeed News guy, who had the very interesting commentary about, and I don't know if anybody had come out and said this, but it's very frequently the case that, say, Republicans and pro-gun types like to come out and say, well, don't politicize this tragedy. Let's pray for the victims and let them be in our hopes and prayers, et cetera, et cetera. But don't, it's their effort to sort of take away, focus on the gun angle of the attack. And that if you say we really need to do something about these AR-15s and the guns that are in circulation, and who knows, whatever else you might decide to go after in an effort to reduce the number and scope of these attacks, and people say, well, don't politicize the deaths. Don't politicize this tragedy. And David Mack pointing out, to say something like that, the tragedy is that you made, as he says, as he puts it, our very existence political. So speaking for the broader LGBTQ and everything else community, I guess, the tragedy here is that you made our very existence political. And if you want to own our lives, you must own our deaths too. That's an interesting angle on it. And there he attaches a piece here. I don't know. Let's open it up and see if it's one of his own. It is. The Colorado Springs shooting was always going to happen is the headline. And I guess you're getting at the politicization. But I thought the larger and more interesting point, and maybe he explores it more in his piece, we should read it and find out, is, by all indications, it looks like we're looking at a mass shooter showing up at a gay bar or a gay hangout. I don't know if it was strictly gay bar or it was just that night or they were having the drag shows, but to choose the night to go that there's also drag performances going on after all the toxic nonsense that's been circulated among Republican and conservative circles about there being some sort of danger about drag shows and, they're quote unquote groomers and, you got to stop them and it's this terrible thing. We got to stop them and keep them out of the library. And you're justified, implying that you're justified in launching these attacks because of the danger they're putting children in. And by the way, we're also hearing very interesting and very telling and wry comments about, the cops in Uvalde couldn't do anything, but drag performers were able to take this guy down. Now, of course, we're finding out that that's not actually the case, but that they did people there participated in their own defense et cetera, et cetera. But maybe after all the screaming about drag performers posing the dangers, as it turns out, it's drag performers that can take out the shooters. They should put drag performers at every school, not cops. The cops hesitate and hang out in the hallways and do nothing, but the drag performers leap into action. Well, okay, maybe that's not actually the story, but still, the point is salient, I guess. But yeah, the more profound point, I think, is that by using your political networks to poison the world, the atmosphere, and people's minds against gay, lesbian, transgender, etc., folks buy everybody included in the acronym salad that we're using these days. And in particular, I think of late, yes, the transgender community and drag performers, which really, I mean, we never really had to kind of call that out specifically before, but now it's such a target. They absolutely politicized this, and they caused those deaths by politicizing the very existence of those people. And David Mack's point is a great one, to now say, well, you can't politicize the deaths when not only did we politicize the lives of these people, but we politically advocated for the deaths of these people. Oh, I didn't know people were going to take it that seriously. I just thought if I told them that every single one of them was a mortal danger to every child in the world, and that everybody looks favorably upon people who eliminate threats to children, wink, wink, you'll be a big hero if you do this. Don't tell me I can't politicize that death. That death was caused by your politicization of the situation. And you knew it was going to result in deaths, even though you keep saying it, you didn't know. And to the extent that that's an argument that people make, oh, I didn't know it was going to result in people's death. Here, David Mack's BuzzFeed piece, I think, makes that argument. The Colorado Springs shooting was always going to happen. The shooting in Colorado Springs comes after a year of targeted political attacks against the LGBTQ community. Now, those same far-right figures would prefer you didn't politicize this slaughter. Well, come on. Another weekend passed in America. His piece begins with yet another mass shooting. And usually there are half a dozen, actually, every weekend, and that's the truth. We just don't hear about them. This time at a gay bar in Colorado Springs. In an attack that lasted barely more than a minute, 5 people were killed and at least 18 others injured when a gunman stormed Club Q, a bar that had functioned as a rainbow safe haven for the conservative town's small LGBTQ community. Were it not for the heroism of patrons who confronted the shooter and subdued him with one of his own weapons, sort of by beating him over the head with it, many more might be dead, among the dead. That inconceivable act of bravery is worth unending celebration. But for LGBTQ people across the country, the most devastating part of this slaughter was its sense of inevitability. All year long, it has felt like we have been inching toward some form of fated tragedy, and I think, unfortunately, there could be more, I will add, like a car crash in slow motion, and now the horror has manifested. For some time now, a resurgent right-wing strategy of portraying queer people as an invasive species of predators who, quote, groom children in classrooms, quote, mutilate the bodies of transgender children, or otherwise corrupt young minds, has burrowed into the mainstream political discourse with horrifying efficiency. Don't say gay, the edict goes, or else it will spread like a virus. The result has been an alarming and clear escalation in attacks and demonstrations against LGBTQ people. Armed militia members have presented themselves at pride events and gay bars and local libraries across the country. Trolls have launched coordinated attacks on anti-suicide support services for young queer people. Bomb threats have been called into children's hospitals that provide care to transgender children. As the rhetoric has become more contentious, a sense of foreboding has grown, the feeling that the very worst in society was poised to pounce. I don't call her murdery Trader Green for nothing. I mean, that's who I'm talking about myself, but Every other one of these things, there's plenty to go around and plenty of blame for it. There are folks out there who are primed to answer what they see as social questions with violence. Catherine Oakley, the state legislative director for the Human Rights Campaign, told me, David Mack, not me, but in June. And to feed those folks the kind of rhetoric that politicians fed them this year is giving them a license to behave in exactly the way they want to, which is with violence, with anger, with disrespect. And yet, if you were hoping the bloodshed might prompt something of a reckoning in these circles, you are, of course, mistaken. Well, all right, we'll continue with the rest of the reading of this article rather than trying to squeeze in one more paragraph after this, but making some excellent points and setting the table for us here. Thank you.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's jump back in to David Mack's piece here. We kind of broke it off for the break, but to reset this whole thing here, just remember that if you were hoping the bloodshed might prompt something of a reckoning in these circles, that is the circles where politicians use rhetoric essentially and virtually assured of prompting exactly this kind of response, well, then you are, of course, mistaken. Consider the sheer callousness and inhumanity of, here's that name again, Chaya Raichik, the Brooklyn real estate agent behind Libs of TikTok, who just hours after the attack unfolded began directing her ire and that of her 1.5 million Twitter followers at other drag performers in Colorado. Like, too late to kill the ones that this guy killed in Colorado Springs. But if you're in the area and looking for more of them to target, here's how to find them. So all you need to do is bring your own BYOAR15, I guess. And thanks a lot. And I don't know. I mean, by the way, I just want to point out what a testament and restraint it is that she thinks that there's such tremendous danger being posed by the LGBTQ community. And now everybody knows her name and where she is and what she does and how to find her. And nobody has kicked in her door and machine gunned her and her family. And we hope that that never happens. But it's interesting to note that, I mean, that could happen and no one is doing that. And no one appears poised to do that. And no one advocates that happening. And it's, I guess in some ways it's kind of weird and unsettling and almost disappointing in the sense that I don't understand. It can all go one way like that. Like ordinarily the check against behaving this way is, well, someone could kick your door in and kill your whole family. And as it turns out, really no, because that's not the kind of thing that gets done by the entire other side. And to stand, and of course, to have to sit there and be told about everything else, both sides. Well, when it comes to like the ultimate action against the other side, the slaughter of the actual people opposed to you politically, one side does it, the other side doesn't do it, and you still have to sit there and hear about both sides. And it's like, what? I don't know. I don't know how to reconcile that in my own mind. But there it is. It's out there. And she continues to do this stuff. And I mean, what precautions is she taking against this happening to her? I just don't understand And I guess, I don't know, I guess when she comes to the realization, the epiphany that in reality, they're just not going to do this. I'm free to continue advocating their murders. They're never going to advocate mine. And she's right, and it's terrible, and I don't know what to do about it, and nothing is the answer. There's nothing. Nothing. How is that the answer to anything? I don't know, but it can't be the other answer because that's not a thing that people do. She's just being inhuman. And I guess at that point, the ironic thing is, I guess the only thing you can do is, like, at that point, you turn to some sort of, I don't know, religious or paranormal belief that, well, in another dimension, she'll be punished for her crimes. And yet, she's by all indications, I think she's the one that's more likely to believe in that kind of religious doctrine. I'm just guessing from being Chaya Raichik, but I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I better get off that subject. But let's get back to where the thoughts are organized with David Mack, who goes on to say, elsewhere, Colorado Republican Lauren Boebert offered platitudes, but zero acknowledgement of how her own rhetoric had repeatedly cast LGBTQ people as dangerous, of course. Other usual far-right chuds like Matt Walsh and Candace Owens distanced themselves for the time being. I would check in on them again today. Distanced themselves from the killings, but still sought to steer the conversation back to more comfortable framing the threat we, members of the LGBTQ community, wherever they may be, the threat we pose to children. It's liberals, they argued, who are politicizing the tragedy. Do not politicize this tragedy. The tragedy is that you made our very existence political. And if you want to own our lives, you must own our deaths too. Those deaths on the eve of Transgender Day of Remembrance, no less, include Kelly Loving, a 40-year-old trans woman visiting from Denver, naming the names here now, Ashley Paugh, I hope I get these names right, P-A-U-G-H, who, or maybe, I don't know if I got that right. I wish I had thought to check this in advance, but no, I didn't know this was coming. I surprise myself with these readings the same way as you, except you don't have to suffer the embarrassment. But okay, that's not what it's about here. It's about the names. Kelly Loving, 40-year-old trans woman visiting from Denver. Ashley Paugh, 35, who leaves behind a daughter and a husband who was her high school sweetheart. Raymond Green Vance, 22, a local straight man who had just received his first paycheck from his new job at a FedEx distribution center, and also, as we learned from Darwin's reading of the piece on Mr. Fierro here, the boyfriend of his daughter. And Club Q bartenders Derek Rump, 38, and Daniel Davis Aston, a 28-year-old trans man. Every single goddamn time I even have the slightest thought of leaving Club Q, someone comes up and tells me, "You're the reason I love this bar." Or, "You and Derek make me feel so safe and welcome here," Aston had tweeted just this year. Now gone. Safe spaces have become a favorite target for mockery among sections of the right who would prefer they be eliminated in the name of subjugation, but they have never had to worry about suspicious stares when they enter a venue, have never had to hesitate when holding their partner's hand, have never had to question their place in a society that defers to them. In a country that is again making LGBTQ people into enemies and others, spaces where we can unclench and find peace among our own community matter more than ever. That's why the attack feels particularly monstrous, as if to say we'll never be safe, not even here. I find myself replaying the words of one of the survivors, Joshua Thurman, who recounted through tears how he barricaded himself inside a dressing room with others and listened to the bullets ring out. "This was our only safe space here in the Springs," Thurman told local station KRDO-TV. "For this to get shot up, what are we going to do now? Where are we going to go?" For the LGBTQ people of Colorado Springs, there are no easy answers to those questions as they grieve and rebuild. But for the rest of us, there can only be one defiant response to this tragedy and the onslaught of other attacks that preceded it. We're going nowhere. So, well put. Definitely. Thanks very much for giving voice to that idea, David. And pleased to be able to read your piece on the air. Colorado Springs, interesting location for it, of course. We've had issues arise with guns in Colorado Springs before, and there are some other angles on this story that perhaps we'll throw into the mix as a result. But I was thinking, was Colorado Springs the place where, it will be a couple of years back now, where they had the issue with somebody walking around out on the street with their AR-15 and some people getting nervous and calling the police and saying, I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if he's like an open carry protester or he's just a mass shooter on his way to his mass shooting, calling the police and saying, we got to have something done here. And the police saying, that's the way it is now in Colorado Springs and other places. You just got to get used to it. They have the right to do that. And they're just probably one of those people trying to get you used to the idea of seeing people walk around with AR-15s, which is, like as though that were an idea that was smart and wonderful and that we ought to have. But they just say it matter-of-factly. And then as it turns out, while people are still on the phone with the cops about it, it turns out, he was a mass shooter on his way to a mass shooting. That's weird. Well, I wish we could have prevented that. But there's no telling, and golly, you just have to wait until people start hitting the floor before you do something about it. Similarly, it turns out that Colorado Springs has this problem fairly constantly, I guess. Here is a piece from The Trace, which tells part of the story as well, as I had something in pocket from the other day from the Washington Post, as well as it turns out the shooter at Club Q was, I guess, somebody who had appeared on police radar before and has had his house searched for bombs and weapons, confiscated, etc. But because of the nature of the weapons, guns, and those being sacred apparently in the United States, and the location, Colorado Springs, and the local gun culture, essentially, they did the same thing here. That every indication that he was a dangerous guy, but we just have to wait until bodies start hitting the floor in order to do something about it. So let's see. I have the Trace piece here. We'll read them. They'd be probably the more pointed of the two. In Colorado Springs, local officials resisted the state's red flag law. So a more generally applicable piece here. But I'm sure they'll probably mention what the Washington Post gets at, which specifically targets the shooter. El Paso County, the site of the mass shooting at Club Q, is one of at least 37 Colorado counties that have declared themselves a Second Amendment sanctuary, mocking safe spaces again, and openly defied the state's gun laws, writes Chip Brownlee for The Trace. But again, back to David Mack's point, quite correctly, that they love to mock the necessity of safe spaces for people and then murder them in their safe spaces and then mock them about wanting safe spaces, which is rather amazing. They're really quite terrible people. The Colorado Springs shooting, in which a gunman killed 5 people and wounded more than a dozen at a queer nightclub on November 19th, has already been framed as a failure of red flag laws, policies designed to allow law enforcement to disarm people considered a clear risk to themselves or others. But in this case, it appears a red flag order could have been used against the suspect, and local officials may have chosen not to. By the way, again, I don't say it lightly, murdery Trader Green. What do we know about murdery Trader Green from before she was a member of Congress, that I'm constantly reminding you of, was her video of herself stalking and mocking victims of, and one particular victim, David Hogue, of the Parkland, Florida, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school shooting, on his way to lobby for some gun sense laws, including red flag laws. And one of the things that she particularly calls out while she's following him, shouting at him and getting no response. Why do you support red flag laws? We can't have those. And of course, our, half joke about the whole thing was the reason that murdery Trader Green hates red flag laws is because they would work against her. Her gun should be confiscated because she's a menace to society. And one day you'll all find out, when it's just a little too late, that we didn't follow the warning signs and do something about murdery Trader Green before she killed people. Now she's just doing it vicariously, sending others to do her dirty work. But red flag laws was something in particular that really irked her. And she wanted to shout at the teenager who had survived a school shooting about red flag laws. And why do you all need safe spaces? But we're going to shoot you in your safe space. But why do you need them? And it'll be interesting, too. She'll be saying, well, red flag laws don't work. Yeah, they don't work when you don't enforce them. And they might miss somebody here and there. But, I mean, you'd have to sort of try maybe and give them a chance before you can declare that they don't work. And it can't be declared that they don't work because you refuse to enforce them and you intimidate anybody on the police force. Actually, you actually fight against them if they even suggest that, well, the law is the law and we're going to enforce the law. No, you better not, or we're going to vote the sheriff out. Anyway, in this case, it does appear that a red flag order could have been used against the suspect, and local officials may have chosen not to because people like Lauren Boebert and murdery Trader Green say, we're going to come and get you, sheriff, if you actually, obey the law and enforce it in El Paso County. Of 64 counties in the state, El Paso County, home to Colorado Springs, is one of at least 37 that have declared themselves a Second Amendment sanctuary, mocking again, and openly defied the state's gun laws. El Paso County's commissioners did so in response to the state's proposed red flag law in 2019. We're not going to pursue these on our own, El Paso County Sheriff Bill Elder said as the law was being debated in the state legislature, meaning the sheriff's office is not going to run over and try to get a court order. Elder has said that the sheriff's office would enforce court orders, and that's all they're really asking you to do, but that it wouldn't pursue petitions on its own except in some extreme circumstances. And by the way, if you want to know what that means, it means we're not going to take people's guns away based on our right to do it by, with red flag laws because we love guns and we love gun freedoms, except in extreme circumstances, i.e. we found out that one of our officers, or maybe me, the sheriff, are the target of the threat, in which case red flag laws are awesome and we'll go take those guns. Data suggests that Elder has been true to his word. In Colorado, the red flag petitions can be filed by law enforcement or a family or household member. An analysis of court records by 9 News found that between January 2020 and that is when the law went into effect, and November 2021, just 39 risk protection order petitions were filed in El Paso County, the most populous county in the state, with more than 737,000 residents. Only 8 of those petitions, 21%, were granted. Now, none of the approved petitions were filed by law enforcement, the 9 News analysis shows. Unlike most counties in the state, they were all initiated by family and household members. Oftentimes, law enforcement are the people who are coming into contact with individuals who pose a danger to themselves or others, said Allison Anderman, Senior Counsel and Director of Local Policy at the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. If they're not using them, they're going to be less effective. That's true. That's interesting. And they're usually the ones who run into people who truly demonstrate the kind of behavior that should trigger a red flag order, but decline to do so because reasons. I love the Second Amendment more than I love preventing danger to myself and others, except if I really think it's a danger to myself, then I'll enforce it. But if I think it's this guy's going to murder his family, well, we'll arrest him when he does. That's not really great. But everybody else, by the way, they're shooting everybody else in creation because they fear for their lives. But if they never fear for anybody else's lives. That's interesting that doesn't move them to action. In the case of the Club Q shooting, the suspect, who was charged Monday with multiple murder and hate crimes charges, allegedly threatened in June of 2021 to detonate a bomb and harm his mother with multiple weapons. He was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, although the charges were later dropped. Kind of curious. The suspect's history made him an ideal candidate for a gun removal order under a red flag law, yet he was never subject to one and legally purchased the 2 guns he allegedly used in the shooting. And I want to stop here for just a moment and contrast that to something that you may have picked up when Darwin was reading you the story about Mr. Fierro, who said essentially, without saying outright, that he had come back from his combat tours with some PTSD, essentially. I don't know whether that's the way he would characterize it, but certainly had taken something troubling home from the war with him, and it manifested in anger and outbursts from time to time, I guess, at home. He said, it was hell on his wife and daughter, but that right there in that section of the story that they made specific mention of, that he got rid of all the guns in the house. I mean, he's Army trained, right? It's exactly the kind of person that Second Amendment advocates say should have the guns and can responsibly have the guns. And he recognized, thank God, right? He recognized, I'm having some problems. I have some anger and lashing out issues. Outlashing, is that a thing? Can you say, just reverse it like that? But I'm having some difficulty processing my troubles coming home from tours of duty in these wars. And maybe medication will help. Maybe various treatments will help. Maybe therapy will help. But in the meantime, and maybe forever after, why don't I get rid of the risk factor of the guns in this house? And thankfully, they all made it out of the club alive. But I mean, the boyfriend didn't. He wasn't living there. But everybody else came pretty close. The wife and daughter are injured, right? They were recovering in the hospital. He goes out of his way. And this, I guess, goes back to my anger at the injustice of what's happening with the Libs of TikTok lady, that everybody else disarms as the rational response, and they ramp up, and there's never any threat to them. And it bothers me because there shouldn't be any threat to anybody, so it's no kind of a solution. But it's weird and troubling and irreconcilable that this never goes in the other direction. And maybe, I mean, what if we're wrong about that? And what if the only way to try to start tamping down on this is to turn it back on them? I don't know. But here somebody comes home, recognizes the danger, and says, guns out. The other guy on the other side, if that's another side, I don't really know how to describe it, but the other guy says, I'm going to threaten my mom. We're going to bring some guns into this situation. And wow, what a surprise that taking the guns out of the situation saves lives over here, but only for so long, because eventually, socially, you're just going to run into somebody else who makes the opposite decision and says, I'm going to deal with my anger issues by adding guns to the situation. And sometimes that results in family tragedy. Sometimes that results in suicide. And I guess in the end, in the analysis, given what can happen, maybe you have to say maybe the suicides are the best ways out in those situations. But fairly frequently, it ends up being someone else's problem. And with some frequency, at least, it ends up becoming the problem of people who made the conscious decision to go the opposite direction, to get the guns out of their lives. But this guy, for freedom, is going to reintroduce guns into the lives of people who made a conscious choice not to include that in their lives and who wanted a safe space. Let's mock that. I mean, what happened to freedom? What happened to the freedom and individual rights that we're defending this country? And Fierro has it right? He went to war and defended our right to, I mean, I don't even know if he has a right. I've never really been super comfortable with the idea of fighting for freedom. But, the Iraqis weren't going to pose any particular threat to our choice of whether or not we're going to make consumer decisions about whether to purchase guns or not. They're not going to come over here and take away our rights. But I guess in the most abstract way, well, if we don't take these threats on, somebody could threaten our freedom. Okay. All right. Fine. But in the end, we end up with no freedom anyway. Interestingly, the other thought I had about this whole thing with this shooting was, consider what happened. And I guess I'm going to have to, I got to get back to the Trace thing, but I don't know if I'm going to have time. But this one I really got to get out. My feeling of the mixture of Fierro's story as a veteran, which is particularly interesting, and the things he did over there, and what he brought back with him, and what he was trying to put aside, and what some lunatic with a military-style weapon thrust back into his life regardless. And thank God he responded well, I guess. I mean, it's the best thing you can hope for in a situation like that. But again, he's done his time in the military. Shouldn't he have the opportunity to retire from this military action? But this big guy in the costume who wants to be in the military, but some reason isn't, forces Fierro back into the military with a terrorist-style attack. That's what's happening. A terrorist-style attack on this club. He dons all the weapons of war, dresses up like a terrorist, and goes and conducts a terror. Now, he would say, I'm a patriot, conducting a patriotic operation, stopping the dangerous child molesters and groomers. That's, I'm sure, what he fully believed until he got the crap kicked out of him. And here we should have felt free to just bleep what he got kicked out of him instead. But see, I'm still in control, as angry as I can be about it. But this guy forced Fierro back into the role that he left behind intentionally, and forced the guns back into his life, though he had made the decision to get them out of there, with a terrorist attack on the Club Q here. And now it brings me to the very particular wars in which Fierro served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the watch phrase that was utilized by the Republicans who put us in that situation and forced us into that war and kept us there, that we had to have this war, that we really were defending freedom. Fierro prefers to think of it as defending the individual freedom for the kids to do whatever the hell they want here in the United States. And I don't know that was in any danger from Iraqis or Afghan Taliban, but surely those, the Taliban would, it's the one thing in which they would agree. Weirdly enough, with the right wing here, they probably would have revoked that freedom, and probably violently. But remember that we were told that we had, in this case, Fierro, they had to fight them over there. You already know where it's going. We had to fight them over there so we wouldn't have to fight them over here. And I'm sure Fierro, that was probably part of his watchword as he made his way through his tours of duty. At least when I'm done here and I've done what I came to do, I won't have to, my kids won't have to fight them over here. Except guess what? Not only has Chaya Raichik chosen that there has to be terrorism in your life, not only has this shooter decided there have to be guns in your life, but together with murdery Trader Green in the lead, they have also decided that you will have to fight them over here, because we will be them over here. And you will have to kill us to stop us from killing you over here, regardless of the fact that, yes, you already risked your life over there so that you wouldn't have to risk your life over here, not only fighting terrorists, but guess what? Fighting us, and having us call ourselves patriots while we kill you. What a fantastic repayment to America's veterans. Yes, you will have to fight them over here, because they will be us, and we will try to kill you if you so much as permit people in your family to do the things they're supposed to be free to do in this country because we imagine that they are vampire pedophiles from another planet. That's the justification. And you all have to live with whatever crackpot policy we come up with along the way, that we're banning books. We'll make it so that you need 2 forms of ID to buy a litter box in this country. And that's a legitimate place to come from. And we'll murder you if you don't think so. That seems pretty amazing, but that appears to be the bottom line of where we are. So I don't know what to tell you next for the rest of the day, but watch out and watch your back and get rid of these lunatics wherever we have the opportunity to do it. And we have the opportunity to do it, by the way, in the next 2 weeks in Georgia. So yes, as difficult as it's been to wade through your email inbox and make your way through all the Raphael Warnock related email, do your part, do your duty. You be a patriot. Both sides can be patriots in this situation. All right, great. Anyway, stay focused. Make sure it happens. And let me at least recommend to you that you read the rest of this piece from The Trace. And the other thing I had in mind was the Washington Post piece. Club Q shooting follows a year of bomb threats, drag protests, and anti-trans bills by Casey Parks in the Washington Post. We'll see what happens with the rest of the week. Friday, we're definitely out. We'll see if there's any material to bring you. I have lots to read you and share if you can find a quiet moment to do so. Coin toss. Wake up in the morning and find out what the hell we're doing on Wednesday. I don't know. Maybe I feel moved to continue on at this point. Justice Putnam, though, is next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll see what his plans are for the balance of the week, too. Happy Thanksgiving to the extent that we can make it a happy one.
Listening to Kagro.
Do it in your own little cocoon. I hope it goes well for you. We'll see you Monday at the very least, and maybe in between here and then. I don't know. That one really got me charged up. It was a good progression of stories. I hope it charged you up, too, and will help you guide yourself through the Thanksgiving holiday and doing the right thing for Georgia. See you soon.